I stood at the front of a conference room full of strangers and presented my company's confidential financial data for 18 straight minutes. And the absolute worst part? Somebody told me I was in the wrong room, and I explained to her why she was confused. Let me back up. My name is Dana. I'm 31. I work as a financial analyst, or I did, depending on how you read this, at Corrigan Group, a mid-size logistics company in Columbus, Ohio. 4 years at that company. I'm good at what I do. I have a laminated, color-coded filing system that my coworker Priya once called both impressive and deeply unsettling. I say all that because what happened was not a competence problem. It was a 47 hours without real sleep problem, combined with 2 identical laptop bags and a Tuesday morning that was already on fire before I walked through the door. The date was October 14th. Quarterly presentation to the senior leadership team, 10 a.m. I had been building this specific deck for 3 weeks. Custom slides, formatted charts, a 7-page executive summary that my manager Tom had signed off on twice. I was ready, genuinely ready. Except the night before, my upstairs neighbor decided Monday at 11 p.m. was a great time to either rearrange all his furniture or film an amateur bowling documentary. I could not tell. I lay in bed staring at my ceiling until 2 in the morning, finally fell asleep, woke up at 4 when my cat knocked a glass off my nightstand, fell back asleep at 4:45, and my alarm went off at 6:15. 4 hours of broken, garbage sleep, going into the most important presentation of my quarter. I was at the office by 7:30, made coffee, drank that coffee, made a second coffee, sat at my desk and ran through my slides 3 more times. Everything looked perfect. Tom stopped by at 8:45 and said the deck looked great. I felt good. Tired, but good. Here is where it all starts to go wrong. At 9:10, I got a message from Marcus in IT saying there was a minor issue with the projector cable in conference room B where the leadership presentation was scheduled. He said it would be fixed in 15 minutes. Fine. I packed up my laptop, grabbed my bag and my coffee, and decided to walk a lap around the floor while I waited. At 9:28, I looped back. Conference room B still had a cluster of IT people around it and a tangle of cables on the table. Marcus gave me a thumbs up that I now know meant absolutely nothing. At 9:33, I made the decision that changed everything. Conference room A was right next door. Empty. Clean. The projector already had that little green, ready light glowing on the wall. I figured I'd set up in there and somebody would come redirect leadership when room B was fixed. It seemed like a completely reasonable temporary solution. What I did not know, because I hadn't slept properly in 2 days and was running on caffeine and blind optimism, was that our office shares the 4th floor with a company called Kellerman and Associates, a consulting firm. They have a shared use arrangement for overflow meetings with 2 of our conference rooms. I knew this technically. I had been told on my first week. It had never once come up in 4 years. Conference room A was their overflow room that morning. I walked in, connected my laptop to the projector, and sat down to wait. People started filing in around 9:45. I recognized some faces, or I thought I did. In my sleep-deprived state, I processed the room as people I see in the building and didn't flag the ones I'd never actually been introduced to. Our leadership team pulls in people from multiple regional offices for these quarterlies. Unfamiliar faces were completely normal. Nobody said anything strange. A few people were on their phones. One man poured himself a coffee from the side table carafe and sat down without making eye contact with anyone. Standard meeting behavior. I was already mentally rehearsing my opening. Tom walked in at 9:57 and sat in the back row. This was the one data point that should have stopped everything. Tom was supposed to be in this meeting. He sat down, pulled out his phone, didn't seem at all surprised to see me up front. I took that as confirmation. Of course I did. At 10 a.m. exactly, I smiled at the room, clicked to my first slide, and said, "Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll be walking you through Corrigan Group's 3rd quarter performance today." Nobody reacted. I took that as permission to proceed. I went through the Q3 revenue summary, the regional breakdown. I explained a dip in our Midwest logistics contracts and why Q4 projections still look strong. I was confident, making eye contact. I made a joke about the Midwest dip that landed okay. Someone nodded. I was in full professional autopilot. I was 7 slides in when a woman in the second row raised her hand. I pointed to her. Yes, go ahead. She said, I'm sorry, what company did you say this was for? I said Corrigan Group, our Q3 numbers. Completely straight face, still in presentation mode. She said, we're Kellerman and Associates. And here is the part that still makes me want to walk into the ocean. I smiled at her. I actually smiled at her like she was the confused one and said, right, I know, you use our conference rooms sometimes. There was a pause, a long, specific, terrible pause. She looked at the man sitting next to her. He looked back at her. And then Tom, from the back row, said my name very quietly, just Dana. I looked at Tom. Tom looked at the projector screen, then at me, then very slowly back at the screen. His mouth was open, but nothing was coming out. I looked at the screen. Slide 7. A bar chart of Corrigan Group's year-over-year shipping volume by region. Our company logo sitting right there in the corner. And then I actually looked at the room, really looked. I did not know a single person in that space except Tom. Not one. The woman who raised her hand was wearing a lanyard with a Kellerman and Associates badge on it. The man who had nodded at my Midwest joke had a Kellerman polo shirt on. There was a stack of Kellerman-branded folders on the side table that my brain had filtered out completely. I stood at the front of that room for what felt like 10 years. In real time, it was about 4 seconds. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I said the only thing my brain could produce. Oh no. Not I'm so sorry, not there's been a mistake. Just oh no, out loud, to 15 strangers whose quarterly strategy session I had completely hijacked. The room went quiet for one beat, and then the man in the Kellerman polo lost it. Full, genuine, can't hold it together laughing. He slapped the table. Not meanly, he looked genuinely delighted, the way people look when something absurd happens that they know they'll be telling for years. That laugh broke the tension enough that I found my voice. I said, I am so sorry, I am in the wrong room, I am so sorry. The woman who had questioned me, I found out later her name was Renata, and she was their VP of Operations. She put her hand up and said, no, genuinely, your Q3 numbers looked solid. Congratulations on the Midwest recovery plan. Kind, or a little bit savage, maybe both. Tom made a sound from the back row that was somewhere between a laugh and a cough. I closed my laptop, unplugged the cable, picked up my bag, and walked out. I said I'm so sorry 2 more times on the way to the door. I heard laughing as it closed behind me. I stood in the hallway. The actual Corrigan Group leadership team was standing 20 feet away outside conference room B. Marcus had just finished fixing the projector cable. Our CFO Linda was there. Our COO Brett was there. 12 other senior leaders, all of them waiting. Tom came out of the wrong conference room behind me 30 seconds later, straightened his jacket, and said, and I will never forget this, conference room's ready, Dana, shall we? He said it like nothing had happened. Like he had not just watched me present proprietary financial data to a consulting firm for 18 minutes. I said, yes, absolutely, let's go. I walked into conference room B, set up my laptop, and delivered the actual presentation to the actual leadership team. I do not remember a single word of it. My body just ran the program while my brain was somewhere out in the parking lot having a quiet crisis. Linda asked 2 questions. Brett made a comment about Q4. Everyone filed out at 11:15. And then Tom closed the door and looked at me. I started, Tom, He held up one hand, breathed through his nose, then said, I'm going to need you to explain how you delivered a full financial briefing to a consulting firm for 18 minutes without realizing something was wrong. I laid out the whole sequence: the broken sleep, the IT delay, the green projector light, the conference room decision. Tom listened with his arms crossed and the expression of a man doing significant internal work to stay professional. When I finished, he said, did they get a copy of the deck? I said no, screen only. I didn't hand anything out. He nodded slowly, then said, go eat lunch, I need to make some calls. The some calls part was the part that scared me. I went back to my desk. Priya took one look at my face, rolled her chair over, and I told her everything. Her eyes got progressively wider until she looked like she was trying to see around corners. She said, "Dana," and then just stopped. That was the whole sentence. She passed me a granola bar from her desk drawer. It was the most comfort anyone could offer, and I ate it in 3 bites. At 1:30 p.m., I got a calendar invite from HR. Meeting at 3 p.m., same day. Subject line, follow-up conversation. That subject line is specifically designed to tell you nothing while doing very specific things to your blood pressure. I accepted it because what else was I going to do? Priya saw me accept and said, "HR same day, that's fast." I said, "Great, thanks, very helpful." She gave me a second granola bar. The 90 minutes between 1:30 and 3 p.m. were genuinely some of the longer 90 minutes of my life. I sat at my desk and tried to work and mostly just read the same paragraph of a logistics contract 6 times without absorbing anything. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked completely fine, which felt insulting given the circumstances. At 2:58, I walked to the HR suite. Our HR business partner is a woman named Sheila. Mid-50s, short silver hair, the energy of someone who has seen every version of workplace disaster and rated most of them a 4 out of 10. I have always liked Sheila. She gestured for me to sit. Tom was already in the room. So was our general counsel, a man named Patrick, who I had only ever seen at all-hands meetings. Patrick being in the room added a new and very specific layer of stress. Sheila said, "Dana, we want to talk through what happened this morning." I explained the whole sequence again. Sleep deprivation, the IT delay, the conference room mix-up, the fog. I didn't make excuses. I laid out facts. I said I understood that presenting financial information to a third party, even accidentally, was a serious issue. Patrick asked if I had distributed any printed materials or sent any files externally. No to both. Screen only. He asked if anyone from Kellerman had asked questions about the data. I said Renata had raised her hand mostly to identify that I was in the wrong room and that her comment about the Midwest Recovery Plan was more of a kind gesture than a data inquiry. Patrick made a note. Then Tom said, "For what it's worth, Dana didn't share anything beyond what's in our standard quarterly reporting structure. No proprietary strategy, no client data. Nothing beyond a general performance overview." That was Tom going to bat for me. I recognized it immediately and made a mental note to send him something good at Christmas. Patrick said something that actually surprised me. From a legal standpoint, the situation was awkward but not catastrophic. Our Q3 numbers hadn't been filed yet and weren't classified as insider information the way public company data would be. The main thing was confirming that Kellerman hadn't retained anything actionable. Sheila said they'd follow up by end of day. The meeting was 22 minutes. Nobody yelled. Nobody used the word termination. I walked out with my job still technically intact and zero certainty about what end of day was going to bring. Back at my desk, Priya looked up. I gave her a still alive nod. She passed me a third granola bar. I had now eaten 3 granola bars in 3 hours, no real meal, fully running on stress chemicals and oat clusters. At 4:45, Sheila stopped by my actual desk, not the HR suite. She stood there a moment and then said, "So, Kellerman was very nice about it." I waited. She said Renata had called them before they even reached out. She said Kellerman's own meeting had started 20 minutes late anyway because their presenter got stuck in traffic. Renata had described me, and Sheila was quoting directly here, as their very confident gatecrasher, who was actually a funny way to fill the time. She said they hadn't taken notes on our data and wished us well on Q4. I said, "She sounds like a good person." Sheila said, "She really does. Get some sleep tonight, Dana," and she walked away. That was the end of it from an HR and legal standpoint. No write-up, no termination. A strong recommendation to sleep more, which, fair. What I did get was a new and extremely specific reputation. Tom had to explain to the senior leadership team why he'd briefly been missing from the hallway when they were all waiting outside room B. He kept it brief and professional, but these things always get out. By Thursday morning, my colleague James, 3 desks over, self-appointed office social historian, had already named it. He called it the Kellerman keynote. Said it like it was an established historical event. Remember the Kellerman keynote. The way you'd say, remember the great blackout of 2003. By Friday, someone, I never found out who, had printed a small sign and stuck it to conference room A's door. It read, "Please verify you know everyone in this room before presenting financial data." Facilities took it down by noon, not before 6 people photographed it. The man in the Kellerman polo who had laughed, his name was Derek, and he worked directly for Renata, sent me a LinkedIn connection request that Thursday. His message said, "I just want you to know that you gave the most confident wrong room presentation I have ever witnessed, and I respect it completely." I accepted. How could I not? The part that still gets me came 2 weeks later. October 28th, an email from Renata at Kellerman and Associates. She'd got my contact through Derek, short and professional. Kellerman was looking for a senior financial analyst with logistics sector experience. She'd been impressed with the clarity of my presentation and my composure after the mix-up. If I was ever considering a move, she'd love to have a conversation. I sat with that email for a long time. I wasn't actively looking. I liked Corrigan. I liked Tom. I liked Priya and her seemingly endless supply of desk granola bars. But I read it 3 times, and then I scheduled the call. We talked for 45 minutes. Renata was direct and funny and clearly excellent at what she did. The role was a step up from my current title. The compensation was significantly better, roughly $18,000 more per year, plus a stronger bonus structure. Kellerman had offices in 4 cities and was expanding. It was a genuinely strong opportunity. I told Tom before anything was decided. He deserved that. I went into his office, closed the door, and laid out the whole thing, the email, the conversation, the offer that was coming together. Tom leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then said, "You accidentally auditioned for a competing company and they want to hire you." I said, "That is one way to describe what happened, yes." He was quiet a few seconds. Then, "Is it a good offer?" I said it was. He said, "Then take it if it's right for you, and I'll write you the best reference you've ever read." I cried a little in his office, which was embarrassing, but he handed me a box of tissues without making it weird. I'll count that as one of the better moments of my professional life. I accepted the Kellerman offer on November 7th, gave 4 weeks' notice. Last day at Corrigan was December 5th. Priya threw me a small goodbye lunch. She brought granola bars as a joke and also a real cake. James gave a speech that included the Kellerman keynote 3 times, annoying and accurate. Tom shook my hand and said, "You're going to be great over there." I believed him. On my way out that last day, I stopped by conference room A. The sign was long gone. Just a projector, some chairs, a whiteboard, a completely normal room. I stood there for a second. Then I went downstairs, got in my car, and drove away from a building I'd worked in for 4 years. I started at Kellerman on January 6th. Renata introduced me at the morning stand-up. She said, "Some of you have already met Dana." Derek, from across the room, started slow clapping. Full genuine slow clapping. The rest of the room had no idea what was happening. I laughed so hard I had to put my coffee down. Renata waited for Derek to stop and said, "Dana comes highly recommended and we're glad to have her." Completely straight-faced. She is excellent. I've been at Kellerman about 8 months. The work is more complex, the team is good, and Renata is the kind of manager who gives real feedback and also lets you be a person. Priya and I still get coffee, she's at Corrigan, still hoarding granola bars, still making coworkers feel judged by her filing system. Tom sent me a message last month when Corrigan announced a new regional contract. I appreciated it. At Kellerman's holiday party in December, I told the full story to a group of about 8 people, including Renata. They knew the broad outline but not all the detail. When I got to the part where I told Renata, "Right, I know you use our conference rooms," when I told her that to her face in the story as we stood in a party together, she put her head down on the table. Not meanly. Just in a "I cannot believe you said that" way. Derek was crying from laughing. Renata picked her head up and said, "The thing that got me was that you just kept going. After she told you who we were, you still thought we were confused." I said, in my defense, I had slept 4 hours. She said, "Dana, you had the confidence of someone who had slept 12. She's not wrong. That's maybe the most accurate description of sleep deprivation brain I've ever heard. You're not less confident when you haven't slept. You're just confidently wrong about more things." I now have 2 laptop bags, one navy, one olive green, both labeled. A keychain on the work bag so I can tell the difference by touch in the dark. Probably overkill. I do not care. And before every single presentation I give, I look at every person in the room. I make eye contact with at least 3 faces I recognize before I say a single word. If I don't recognize at least half the room, I ask one clarifying question first. 30 extra seconds. Every time, without exception. The mistake was viscerally, physically embarrassing in a way I felt for days. I replayed the moment Renata said, "We're Kellerman and Associates probably 200 times in that first week." The confidence with which I was wrong is still remarkable to me. But it turned into the best professional opportunity I've had. And it became the story I've told at every work event, every dinner party, and every first date icebreaker for the past 8 months. People love it every time. There's something about watching someone else survive maximum professional humiliation that makes everyone feel better about their own worst work moments. So that's it. I walked into the wrong conference room. I presented the wrong company's financials for 18 minutes to a room full of strangers. I was corrected by a woman who was much kinder about it than I deserved. HR told me to sleep more. My coworker gave me 3 granola bars, and I ended up with a better job because the VP on the receiving end thought I handled it well enough to take a chance on. Have you ever been completely, totally, embarrassingly wrong about something, but acted like you had it completely handled? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely cannot be the only one, and misery loves company.